nas suas listas de transmissão de WhatsApp, porque aí nós temos mais gente que pode estar sendo compartilhada com as informações que a gente está dando aqui, tá bom? Bom, dando início ao nosso painel, o tema desse painel é muito importante e a gente trouxe aqui para essa discussão com pessoas que têm muito conhecimento nessa área. Para mediar esse painel, eu vou chamar o meu irmão aqui, o Dedé Martelli. Dedé, por favor, uma salva de palmas para o Dedé. Assente-se aqui ao lado, por favor. Quero também chamar o Guilherme Campos, grande amigo, grande parceiro. Hoje é diretor de Administração e Finanças do SEBRAE, que é o Serviço Brasileiro de Apoio às Micro e Pequenas Empresas. Foi vice-prefeito e secretário do Comércio, Indústria e Turismo em Campinas e também presidente do Correio. Uma salva de palmas para o doutor Guilherme. Senta ali, ao lado. Lá. Também, para compor essa mesa, o nosso sempre e amigo, parceiro, apoiador do nosso trabalho, vereador Luiz Carlos Rossini. Uma salva de palmas. E para finalizar a participação nesse painel, gostaríamos de chamar aqui o doutor Quirino Cordeiro Júnior, nosso querido Quirino. Vai pegar isso, hein? Seja bem-vindo, querido. Por favor. Podem se assentar e eu passo a palavra ao mediador, que vai dar início a esse painel.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigado pela participação de cada um de vocês. Espero que tenham dormido bem. Agradecer imensamente a participação do Rossini, do Guilherme, do Dr. Quirino. E eu acho que eu vou iniciar dando a oportunidade para que cada um possa dar o seu bom dia para vocês.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigado pela oportunidade de estar mais uma vez aqui com vocês. Vamos aqui mais para um bate-papo do que qualquer outra coisa. Muito mais poder trocar experiências e dizer da importância de se ter esse foco na administração pública, pensando nas pessoas que passam por esse e no trabalho que toda essa comunidade, todo esse time pode fazer na recuperação dessas pessoas. Então, trocar experiências e poder estar com vocês aqui aprendendo um pouquinho. Bom dia, vamos lá, vamos ao trabalho.
Bom dia. Bem, primeiro, dizer que é mais uma vez uma alegria e honra poder participar desse congresso do Freemind, rever tantas pessoas conhecidas, tantos amigos. Depois de praticamente 2 anos, aí todos nós vivemos num isolamento, reencontrar presencialmente vocês é uma alegria e honra. É honra maior ainda estar numa mesa com Guilherme Campos, com o Dr. Quirino Cordeiro, falando um pouco de como os agentes políticos podem contribuir nas ações, na construção de políticas públicas voltadas para prevenção, tratamento, melhoria daquilo que é feito na área da dependência química no Brasil. E falar que cada um de vocês pode ser um agente político de transformação da nossa sociedade. Obrigado, tenhamos um bom trabalho aqui.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Martelli. Good morning, Campos. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our in-person participants and also our remote viewers. For us from the federal administration, this is a great opportunity to share some of our initiatives with you, some initiatives that are currently in place. In the beginning of the current administration, we created a department to address prevention initiatives. So it's a pleasure for me to be here to share the initiatives from the federal administration. I want to learn it from you. I want to learn from you, hear from you, share experiences. We have just created the drug prevention national system aimed at bringing together all the initiatives from the federal administration so that we can carry them out with a greater scope and increase the reach of our current programs. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sure this is going to be a very fruitful morning. Yes, thank you. When we were creating the program, when we were setting it up, Paulo, my fella, asked me to come up with a panel called Thematic Panel, Responsibility of Politicians in Relation to the Prevention of Abusive Use of Alcohol and Other Drugs. And then I thought about you guys. I thought about inviting you gentlemen, and that was no accident. Let me tell you why you were the first names that came to mind. Rossini is a tribute of Freemind to the city of Campinas and the good job you've been doing in this city with the church, with the Catholic Church. And also, he's an alderman, so he is engaged with the everyday life of this big city. So we cannot talk about politicians without having politicians with us. You're all located in some municipality, so Rossini is an alderman here, and well, aldermen are in direct contact with the everyday life of a city. They present bills, they talk to the population, so having an alderman, having a politician to stand up for our cause is great. Campinas is a benchmark for drug abuse treatment because of Father Haroldo. So Rossini is here to talk to us about the initiatives that are being conducted in the city of Campinas. He's going to give us a different perspective, a local perspective, the perspective of a city that's been leading these efforts in the country. Mr. Campos is not only an experienced politician, he was the vice mayor of Campinas, and he's been the Secretary of Economic Development, and he was federal congressman for two terms. He's from a big political party, and he has this vast experience, including at the federal level. So not only was he the chair of the Brazilian Postal Service, which is a huge company with over 100,000 employees. So there, he also had some very, very interesting initiatives in this area. And inside the Postal Service, he learned a lot, and he always talked about the problem of alcohol abuse in the corporate world. So he can talk to us about the corporate world, and he can also talk to us about the federal administration, the Congress, and how we can inform the Congress, what the Congress can do, not only in terms of drug prevention, but what the Congress can do to represent you, ladies and gentlemen, how the Brazilian Congress can discuss important topics for the work we do. He is also Director of Administration and Finance of the Brazilian Service for Micro and Small Enterprises. And Dr. Quirino was chosen for obvious reasons. He is in the Ministry of Citizenship, so he works directly with the executive branch. Yesterday we had a masterclass with him. He talked about what's being done at the federal level. So Mr. Quirino brings people together. He has an amazing team with some amazing team members. So he can talk to everyone. He's a person. He's a man who can talk to everyone. The other day, he brought a psychiatrist to talk to the therapeutic community, and it was an amazing event. He has He is an active listener. He's open for conversation. So Mr. Quirino enables us to be heard. He is a very skilled articulator. He is a strong advocate of our cause, and he achieves some great results through dialogue without polarization, and that's why we chose these 3 speakers for this panel. And this panel is going to have a different format. I will ask each one of you to be open for questions. I want this to be interactive. I don't want to be standing here talking, or I don't want this to be like a lecture. I want this to be a conversation. So if you guys have questions, please ask them. And I want you to think of questions that can be answered by the 3 of them. The 3 are going to answer the same questions. Are you happy with that? Yes. So who would like to start? And if you don't volunteer, I will choose a volunteer. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our speakers. I'm the Subsecretary of Drug Policies of the state of Minas Gerais. And my question is, there's a necessary relationship between Parliament, the executive branch, and civil society. Perhaps our alderman can start by telling us a bit about his work here in Campinas and what they're doing to articulate the different branches and civil society. So executive branch, legislative branch, and civil society. How does that articulate in our area? That's a great question. To answer your question, actually, I'll tell you a brief story on how I started this activism. It was the first year of my first term in 1989. Some of you were not even born yet. And a friend of mine came to me, and back then her son was 17 years old, addicted to cocaine. She went to my office and she said, I need to have him committed. And then I went to the hospital, to the local hospital here, to many local hospitals here, municipal hospitals, state hospitals, the Department of Health. And in 1989, there was no public health program to treat drug addiction. And then someone said, why don't you look for Father Haroldo? Father Haroldo was already doing some work in the area. And then I went there with the kid, and he did some screening, the boy. And then he was committed, and Father Haroldo said, do you want to help this kid? The father asked me, and I said, yes, of course. And then he said, well, he is not a one-off case. There are thousands of kids in the same situation, and you, sir, you are a politician. It's up to you to do something. And that was very touching. I never forgot that. Father Haroldo was a very stern man. And I think that every policy is to be designed to address a social problem. But sometimes society has to encourage politicians to take action. And I took that mission for myself, so much so that later I created the Drug Council here in Campinas, the Municipal Drug Council here. And I think that it's the municipalities, the municipal councils that have to, they're an important place for the society to engage with this topic and to discuss drug addiction related topics, because it's there that you can design public policies at the local level. But aldermen can't really do anything. Aldermen intermediate your requests with the executive branch, which is the mayor. Sometimes we actually make this bridge between society and the executive branch. And in politics, dialogue is fundamental. If you have a good relationship with your mayor, with your state governor, with the president, you can open doors and you can advance your cause. But political relations are not always that simple, because these relationships are often pervaded by ideological questions that sometimes hinder the progress of this type of initiative. We can talk more about that later, but anyway, since we're talking about drugs and drug abuse prevention here, the government will only do something if that's a demand from society as a whole. It's a problem that society wants to tackle as a whole. But today, we have more mobilization in society for the legalization of marijuana than to actually treat addicts. So, and that's why I told you in the beginning that we can all be change agents. We are the activists in this area, and we are aware of the changes we need. And if we do not take action, there will always be pressure in the opposite direction. I've seen social media that are more posts in favor of a recent ruling from the Supreme Court than against that. Some sentences from the Supreme Court in favor of discriminalization, legalization, and we have to join forces to go in the opposite direction. Because if we don't do that, political agents will not do anything. All politicians, in the end, want to be re-elected, right? Politicians do things because they're good for society, but actually the main goal of any politician is to be elected, is to stay in office. So society, we as civil society, we have to articulate this demand and put pressure on politicians to achieve what we want. I don't know if that answers your question, but still. My turn.
So when we talk about the role of politicians and civil society demands, I agree with what he said. In order to be elected, you need votes. And to get votes, people have to choose to vote for them. Today, the work of politicians is spread throughout the whole of Brazilian territory, and civil society can help to put pressure on initiatives that could help treating our patients in order to have proper organization within the Congress. Civil society has to demand. I'm sure that your lives are really hard. It's, you work hard to pay for your expenses. It's not something easy. Am I wrong? No, I'm not, right? So if we are organized and if we had one unique focus, things would be much easier. To be honest, I've never been directly connected with the work you do. I'm being very honest. I really appreciate what you do. I am a person who dedicates time to people after they start recovering. I try and help people to be reaccepted in the labor market. And I am friends with the Martelli brothers. I've known them for ages, and this is why I'm here today talking to you about such an important topic. Within the National Congress, I've always addressed demands in a more reactive fashion. I've always been called to work on projects that were urgent demands. At the Mail, when I was the president of the Brazilian Post Office Services, I had 118,000 employees, and many of my employees were affected by alcohol and drug abuse, and this was a reality within the company, and we needed to address that problem. There's no way of hiding it. We have to work to address this problem. Within SEBRAE, we have opportunities for subjects who faced drug abuse to go back to civil society and have the possibility of working. We know that former addicts, they face huge difficulties to go back into the labor market. There's huge prejudice on behalf of companies and co-workers. I saw that when I was working at the Correios. We had a sales partner, a very nice guy. And one day, Toninho disappeared. And he was found in the streets a few days later. He had a bottle of alcohol in his hand, and he was really bad. I gave him an opportunity in the company, and I had the help of a priest. So the company conducted an initiative to accept Toninho back. It was a collective work to help Toninho to recover. So he went back to his family, he went back to live with his daughter, he went back to work, and then he retired and had a normal life. But it was because we worked really hard to reinsert him. But you know that this is an exception, right? So SEBRAE offers opportunity for people who have, gifts. They like things, and we help them to work and have a way of providing for their lives. SEBRAE focuses on entrepreneurism, and the people who are your clients, they need opportunities. So find SEBRAE if you want to focus on people who are recovering and in need of opportunities. It's a fantastic initiative. And It's a privilege to be here talking to you about a concrete initiative that can help all of you to perform your work. And we are very proud of being part of it. And once again, when we talk about politics, we rely on elections, and politicians sometimes only focus on things that will get them votes. So you have a huge power in your hands. You can elect groups of politicians that are going to focus on colleagues and people who will fight for the same initiatives that we support. We need political support to perform initiatives, and we have to address things in a systemic way. We put a lot of effort to help people recover, but sometimes strengths are opposite instead of working simultaneously to increase opportunities. So I think we have to try and work as a group. Good morning, Soraya. Thank you for your question. So, since the beginning of the current government, we created this new secretariat that addresses drug abuse and alcohol, and we started to work and implement initiatives with partners. It was very clear to us since the beginning that we would not be able to do what was necessary by ourselves. Drug issues are really complex, and we need to work as a group. So we have been acting like this since 2019. For example, we've been working along with civil society entities. They've been great partners of the federal government, and you who are here can do a lot. But remember that together we can do much, much more. Remember that when we are together, we don't add up, we multiply. So I am very proud of being here today, and here we have so many people who work in therapeutic communities, and they used to be left aside of the policies in Brazil. We have Instituto Padre Haroldo, which is extremely important, and last December we had 17 places in therapeutic communities all over Brazil. And we have been also working with initiatives that structure the sector. We were able to include therapeutic communities within philanthropy. This is something that encourages the communities and establishes the pillars that are necessary for the communities to keep existing. So we had 12 million reais to invest, and we increased it to 60,000 million. We need family support, and we help institution like a Pastoral da Sobriedade, Amor Exigente, Fazenda Esperança. We also have the help of Alcoólicos Anonymous, Narcóticos Anonymous. So it's a really broad network that works for people's recovery. Next Monday, we are going to sign a technical cooperation agreement. We work in partnership with companies in preventive initiatives. So year after year, we have been trying to reduce, for example, car death as results of car crashes. We need to work as a group, and we have also been working with advocacy groups, and this is extremely important. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, the Congress allowed some private individuals to grow marijuana. This is extremely serious, and people were all over social media in favor. There were more people in favor than against it. So we have to understand that we have to engage in political actions. I will tell you a story. In 2018, I was working in the health ministry, and I worked at CONADI. In 2017, we had changed something very important in the national mental health policy, and we wanted to align what we changed in mental health with drug abuse policies. We started working at CONAD, and I remember that we were there discussing, and there was a representative of civil society. We were discussing the topic of drugs, and I wanted to include in the text of the policy we were creating. It was a resolution. I wanted to say that Brazilian society was against discriminalization of drugs. So I wanted to write down that most of Brazilian society is against this discriminalization of drugs. So in order to be able to really have that written down, I had to prove, I was asked to prove, showing a research study or a pool. We know that most part of Brazilian society is against drugs, but there are groups that are strong and they can persuade politicians. So when we see social media, sometimes we think that those groups do represent most of Brazilian society. But that is far from the truth. This is why we need political engagement of people, of communities and entities. Whatever we do in Brasilia and the city or state spheres depends on political decisions. The more articulated groups are going to be the ones that put the most pressure. And maybe those groups do not represent most of the people in society. So I would like to share with you information about our partnership with the other branches of the government. We work in partnership with the judicial power. We have been trying to establish and create initiatives with them. In the legislative power, we evolved a lot. We were able to publish the new anti-drug law at the beginning of our office, and we also were able to include therapeutic community within the philanthropy laws. And we are, in order to be able to get funds for therapeutic communities, we need the support of the Congress. Last year, we had 8 million reais invested in therapeutic communities. We have been trying to work along the Congress to pass bills and get funds for treatment. We have been working to create a group to support therapeutic communities in the federal level. We have been working along with local governments and city governments here in São Paulo. We have just signed an agreement with the city of Sorocaba, and we also have just signed an agreement to help the government of São Paulo to tackle the crack users. So the federal government establishes, creates policies, but the policies do not get to civil society. This is really difficult, and we were able to evolve thanks to the support of local governments.
It's a bipartite commission that gathers state and federal managers to articulate initiatives in this area. So our intention, ever since the beginning, has always been to have this direct joint work between states, legislative houses, not only at the federal level, but also at municipal and state levels, engaging society, civil society organizations, the third sector, municipal councils, anti-drug commissions. This is the joint work we want to foster, and this is actually a trademark of this federal administration. We usually say less Brasilia and more Brazil. So that's what we actually want to accomplish. We actually want to make the difference in the front line. In other words, we think that this articulation is of the paramount importance. So, in short, I think it's important that in your states, in your cities, in your towns, you should identify the possibilities with a collective mindset, and you should find people who think alike, people who are also fond of this topic. Yesterday we were talking about this, and Dario, Campinas' mayor, was here, and he talked about his relationship with us. So we have a long-standing relationship, and there's a project here in Campinas with 800 civil servants. Is that it? It's 800 civil servants that are being trained, even with international training programs. In this cooperation term that was presented in Abu Dhabi by Paulo. And why is that possible? Because Rossini played this very important role here. He's an alderman here, and he could raise the awareness of our mayor, right? So it's important to keep that in mind, and it's important to raise awareness about this cause and about the importance of collectively advocating this cause. Here we have Fazendas Esperança, the Esperança Farms, and the regional office of SEBRAE, and they're having this fast training program for frontline workers, people, also for people in recovery, people who are about to leave the rehab centers. I recently visited Votuporanga's rehab center, so I just wanted to emphasize this, Dr. Quirino, that I just wanted to emphasize that this can be a federal initiative. This can be done at the national level, bringing, training them as entrepreneurs so that when they leave rehab, they can start their own business, or they can join the labor market in a more prepared way. My name is Marlene. I'm a social worker in the city of Castilho. It's a town of about 20,000 inhabitants in the border with the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. We have a serious problem with drug dependency there, and it's probably because we're on the border. Yesterday I was here, I listened to Dr. Quirino's talk, and that gave me food for thought, because I wondered, where are we getting it wrong? Because we struggle there. In my municipality, we struggle with involuntary commitments. Voluntary commitments are fine, but we have many volunteers. We have voluntary communities that are maintained by the church, by the society, by the municipality. But when it comes to involuntary commitment, we struggle, because this new law says that doctors, together with families, can request the involuntary commitment. But then again, okay, let's say the doctor requests that together with the family, but then the addict does not accept that. So how can we go about that? The police don't help. They can't. They don't have a warrant for that. They cannot touch the addict. So what can we do? Hospitals will say no. Hospitals will say we have no infrastructure for that. We cannot commit them. And it's even worse when we have teenagers. Teenagers can't be sent anywhere. So we end up blind alleys when the family can afford it. Well, if it's like, if the income of the family allows, they will call a private therapy center, and then the private therapy center will come rescue the patient and bring him or her to the therapeutic community. But when it's a low-income family that needs welfare, that needs support from the municipality, we even have a good health department, we have a good administration there, we have the funds, but then we struggle with the legislation itself. We don't have, it's a small municipality after all, so it's a big challenge. I just wanted to to share that. And my question is, where are we getting it wrong? What are we doing wrong? Marlene, thank you for your question. Before we talk about that, perfect. And then, actually, we do have a partnership with many entities, many organizations in these three major fronts: treatment, prevention, and social reinsertion. And we have a partnership with ANGE, the National Association of Young Entrepreneurs, and we have a program called Brasil Mais Empreendedor. So it's associated with some therapeutic communities, and we have been achieving some pretty good results, and it helps with low-cost entrepreneurial projects. We've been achieving some good results with that. We're still working on it. It still needs some improvement, some honing, but it's. So, Marlene, to try and answer your question, we've been changing the legislation. We've been amending the legislation together with the Parliament. We've just passed the new drug bill with a number of changes to strengthen our fight against drugs. And for the first time, we included involuntary commitment for chemical dependence. It was a major breakthrough for this country. Before that, for everyone to be on the same page, right? Because you're all experts, but anyway, before that, we could already have involuntary commitment for people with mental disorders. Of course, that included substance dependence, because chemical dependency is a mental disorder. It's considered a mental disorder. So the law that is in force in Brazil, it's been in force for over 20 years. It's law 10261. Its sixth article provides for voluntary, involuntary, and compulsory commitment. So this was already possible in Brazil, but some law practitioners had a different interpretation of it. They understood that involuntary commitment did not apply to drug addicts, only for those with mental disorders. So after we debated this with the society, this was an open debate, and we ratified the idea that chemical dependence can also be considered, can also be eligible for involuntary commitment. What happened in the past few years is that this was victimized, and I get, as far as I'm concerned, that was a mistake, because there's no violation of rights, there's no abuse of human rights in this type of condition. We're actually upholding the rights of people in clinical vulnerability. We are assuring their right to life, for example, because chemical dependency can lead to suicide, for example. But what happened in Brazil is that hospital beds were closed indiscriminately. The hospital beds that were used for these addicts. And in the past few years, we've been working to change these conditions. There's still a long way to come. And today in Brazil, we have a 0.07 beds per inhabitant for the commitment of those patients in Brazil. If we look at countries from the OECD, developed countries, the rates are like 0.7 beds per inhabitant, meaning 10 times more than we have here. Again, this means that we have a long way to come and that we're still struggling to access services in this area. Commitment, hospitalization services, we're working on it. We're trying to increase the availability of beds, but it's very important that local authorities also play their part, and also work to increase the number of beds available for these patients. So you have to work together with the Ministry of Health and with your State Department of Health to make beds available for people in your municipality. We've been trying to encourage that across the country, but again, it's a joint effort and we need local managers to play their part, to work on it and join forces with us. Another important thing, just a question for you, because a therapeutic unit does not have committed patients in any modality, not voluntary, not involuntary, not compulsory. These units do the welcoming. Where can patients be committed? Hospitals, general hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, specialized clinics in chemical dependency, and we've been even the Federal Council of Medicine recently issued a memo to regulate the technical work in this area. We also have some new regulations on the sanitary aspects of those rehab clinics. So we're working on it. We're increasing regulation. We're actually improving regulation so that we can have a stronger legal framework for that. So we've been working on regulation. We've been encouraging the creation of new beds and new services in the municipalities. But again, unfortunately, the coverage is not enough Brazil-wide. So I'm at your disposal to help you with that. I would love to visit your municipality and try to help you. And again, as federal administration, we're trying to help the states, the municipalities to solve these problems. In 2020, we had a big training program for SAMU, the emergency services, across the country to address this matter in pre-hospital settings, people with chemical dependencies, suicidals, people who need removal to healthcare services. So that's very important, but municipalities have to engage. Municipalities have to have their own emergency services and they have to engage their own Department of Health. Of course, no one really wants involuntary. If it's involuntary, it means they don't want it, right? But then with this pre-hospital approach, we can help, right? We can do a better job if we have good pre-hospital services and if we prepare the hospital services to receive those patients, and then after the patient is committed, it's a medical procedure. It takes a doctor to make this decision. Of course, it's discussed with the family, with the caregivers, but it is a medical thing. It takes a doctor to sign it and say this patient needs commitment, or maybe there's so the municipalities themselves have to come up with references. If you have a cancer patient in your city, what do you do with them? You take them to the hospital, to this hospital, or if someone has a heart attack and needs a bypass surgery, what do? Well, you send them to another municipality, a general hospital. Same thing with mental disorders. So the municipality itself needs a reference center to refer these people to. And this local arrangement has to be done so that we can actually fulfill these demands. In Brazil today, we have something like that. Together, the federal government is working on that so that we can have concrete and feasible alternatives for people in this situation. We're working with the state of São Paulo and with the municipality, with many municipalities here, and we have just announced that they're doing involuntary commitments for people in the crackland of São Paulo city. This doesn't mean that they go there and they arrest people and take them to involuntary commitment. No, but people in extremely vulnerable situations are taken to health services to receive the proper the treatment they need, and this may include involuntary commitment. Indeed, that's a good question. That's a good question that because you're an alderman, right? So I'm sure many people go to your office asking you what to do and asking you for alternatives. And the truth is that we sometimes don't know what to say, because most people don't. Most people don't know what to do and how to refer people to other services. So yes, we need to raise awareness about how the entire network works. Yes, with Law 10261, with the psychiatric reform bill, we provided for the involuntary commitment. It's being regulated now. I'm a member of the anti-drug committee of the state of São Paulo, and we've been receiving many reports from prosecutors, because it's involuntary, it's against one's will. But there's no protocol to determine that, because how can you seize someone against their will and take them to a clinic? Unfortunately, there is some abuse being, there are some reports of abuse of some clinics that force people, that tie people up. There are some reports of violations and abuse from some clinics. So together with the health authorities, we still have to face that. We don't have a protocol or a procedure for that, for the conduction, for the removal of those patients to clinics and rehab centers. So, because it's involuntary and citizens have the right to say, no, I don't want, so bringing them to a clinic by force is not an option, and there are many barriers to this type of involuntary commitment today. Actually, we're working with emergency services across the country, and the emergency services, SAMU, SAMU, they do have a protocol for that. So in serious situations, vulnerable situations, risky situations, there is a protocol for that. You can have private clinics working on that. That's a problem, because that's where most reports of violations come from. But emergency services, SAMU services, follow a protocol. They have their work protocols and they follow them. In Brazil today, there are violations, there are some excesses, but that's not the main pain point. The main pain point is the absence of initiatives, right? What we do is flawed, but the biggest problem is what we don't do. And this is what led to a place like Crackland. It's a big problem in downtown São Paulo, and for the compulsory commitment, the individual he or she has to be declared incapable. The patient has to be declared unable by a judge, incapable. Good morning. Thank you for the session. Thank you for the talk. My question is for Dr. Quirino. Municipal councils are at the front end, right, together with state councils, but they're in the front line. So in practical terms, how can we strengthen these councils, legally speaking, and how can we encourage interaction between different councils and different prevention projects? How can we encourage prevention projects in the municipalities? How can we articulate that? Yes, that's interesting. Municipal councils play a very important role, not only in drugs, right? But municipal councils play a very important role I think I'll hand it over to Mr. Campos for this one. Yes, state councils and municipal councils, again, they're very important, and it's very important that civil society can engage and recognize the value of these councils. Rossini was showing me I know many members of the council, and this is a very important question, and this takes us back to the beginning of this conversation. If we look at the profile of counselors, drug counselors in the state of São Paulo, for example, they are not representative of our population. They do not represent São Paulo's society as a whole. We have counselors here, we have counselors representing several interests, but we fail to represent the actual interests of São Paulo's society. They represent, there are counselors representing drug legalization, anti-commitment organizations, and it's crazy. And this happens everywhere. And why is that? Because most of our society is not mobilized. We're not articulated to fill these positions. So most of those people are activists that are trying to advance their agenda, but it's their agenda, not necessarily the agenda of the majority of the Brazilian population. And this happens with national councils, state councils, municipal councils, especially in drug and alcohol prevention. So most importantly, local society has to be engaged with municipal councils. We encourage that. We encourage therapeutic communities and support groups to fill those places, fill those positions, and occupy those councils, because there are no empty spaces in politics, right? I think an old politician used to say that, but still, there are no empty spaces. All spaces are, if you do not fill it, someone will. And then maybe this person will have interests that are not the same as yours. So at the federal administration, we've been working on that, and we've been encouraging the organizations that represent the majority of our society, because, you can come up with a group and say, okay, we advocate the legalization of marijuana. This is not even close to being the opinion of the majority of our society. But then if you combine 3 or 4 groups, they can determine the agenda of these councils. They can determine they can lead the agenda. So keep that in mind and think about your political participation, because this is what this roundtable is about, right? So I strongly recommend that every organization here occupy health councils, child and teenage councils, education councils, because that's the best thing we can do to make sure our voice is heard. At the federal level, we could approve the voluntary commitment of teenagers. It's contrary to what's being done here in the state of São Paulo. Of course, we respect the state ruling, but that's not the federal understanding.
I cannot say for sure because I haven't been exposed to research studies. So the state of São Paulo only agrees with voluntary commitment. And sometimes a young teenager wants to be committed, the family wants the person to be committed, and politicians go against it. So I am here to emphasize our role in the political sphere, and we're here to help you throughout this process of recovery. Well, you didn't ask me the question, but as a politician, I will give you an answer. So, you might be asking yourselves, what is this gentleman doing here? Is he here because he wants more votes? No, I'm not here because of this. I am here to learn with you and advise about this topic and other topics like economic development and others are important. Of course, that ideology plays an important role. We know there are the smaller groups who are very well organized, and they go against what we have been fighting for. So we will have councils that are contaminated by people who are not open to commitment. So we don't have to sit down and feel sorry for ourselves. We have to go and fight. It is a matter of organization, okay? The cities have to organize themselves. The councils in different municipalities, they have to talk to each other. You have to work in a complementary way. Once you achieve something or in a council, you can move the people who were successful from one council to others, and then we multiply. So I would like to talk a little bit more about municipal councils. So we are a representative democracy. We have the right to choose those who represent us. But we are also a participative society, and the channel of participation of society in our democracy are the councils. So what each government has its own policies. So the policies would go from federal government policies to state policies. But once a policy becomes a public policy, and every public policy is obliged to have the participation of civil society, and the councils are these instruments, but they are poorly used by society. At Pastoral da Sobriedade, we encourage militants to occupy councils, municipality councils. I'm not just talking about drug councils. I'm talking about all the councils that are available, because in the councils you are able to discuss, for example, how a mayor will invest funds in healthcare or education. In those councils, we are able to discuss how the city government is addressing drug issues. It is forbidden to sell and supply any type of substance that might turn minors into addicts. So if in your city, if you ask your 12-year-old child to buy beer in a small pub, will he be able to get beer? He might. So now, if you ask this for a child, you might be arrested. So in Brazilian culture, alcohol is not drug. It's normalized. I'm just giving you an example, a simple one. I want to show you how municipal councils can work. And we can discuss demands. We can say, look, we have a problem with committing patients. So if you address this topic in a council and you get to the government and tells them, we might be successful. I have always encouraged the councils and, to be a member of councils. Pastoral da Sobriedade and other institutions wanted to occupy the one vacancy available in the council. And then people would say, oh, the church wants to influence. It was really hard for us to get that vacancy. But the councils are democratic spaces. We have to respect the opposing opinion. But we see that legalizing movements are better organized than those who agree with us. Dom Irineu Danelon, who created Pastoral da Sobriedade, would say, what's evil is very well organized. What we have to organize well is what is good. So we have strength. We just have to organize ourselves politically. And now I'm going to tease you. So the three of them highlighted how important it is for civil society to occupy places in councils. So when you are able to commit someone, you are helping the federal government. When the city, well, let's talk about municipal councils. When you create a relationship with the mayor, you are helping out your city. So, the cities and the governments are not making a favor, okay? You have to try and occupy room in municipal councils. The three of them just said that if you don't occupy space in the councils, other groups are going to take over the power. And everybody knows that mayors, they control municipal councils. Our opposers, they have tons of money, and we don't have enough money, and we rely on public services, and we have to work harder. You are helping us. It's not a favor that you're not doing a favor to anyone, okay? You are working. So there are many people who would like to ask questions. We have to wrap up at 10:30, and if we are not able to address your questions, you can ask directly to our panelists. Good morning, everyone. I am from Pastoral da Sociedade, Espírito Santo. I'm going to share with you what happens in the city I live. I don't know how this works in other cities. I would like to pay my compliments to Dr. Quirino. he shared with us information about everything that works in this country in our struggle to fight drugs. In the city where I live, I always rely on CAPES, which is the public service. I think that CAPES should work in partnership with groups like ours. These groups would complement treatment. I think, for example, CAPES could help out even more. They could be present at schools. If a child has a parent who is an alcohol abuser, this kid could have help at school. So CAPS could be better included in society. Another aspect that I would like to address is the fact that drug policies are evolving. Sometimes we take huge steps, but whenever the government changes, the law changes, and we have to restart everything over from scratch. So it is really difficult to create programs and policies that fight drugs. So I'm wondering if there would be a way of tying the policies so that when government changes, we don't have to start from scratch again. Who else wants to ask questions? Good morning, everyone. I am Julia Santos. I am the coordinator of the Youth Committee. I work in a social project in the city of Pindamonhangaba in a drug prevention program with teenagers in schools. I would like to ask you about how important you think the teenagers are in drug prevention initiatives. And I would also like to tease the organization of the event organization, so protecting our young people against drugs for the future. You know, we have no teenagers here. If we're here to protect them, why? How come we don't have them here in the audience? And Saturday morning, we are going to put together a lecture about the work that we do, and I would like to invite all of you to be there. Well, I am one of the organizers of these events, so we have 100 teenagers undergoing a specific training program to become prevention leaders. And the first topic we are addressing is how to use social media to fight drugs. And I can share with you other initiatives that are taking place in this event. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hernani. I am a teacher at the public administration of the city of São Paulo, and I really like the topic of this panel, and I think that schools play an important role for prevention. I feel privileged in São Paulo. I work at Escola de Aplicação. It's a school within the campus of the University of the State of São Paulo. We perform a very interesting initiative there. We kind of have certain some control. The young teenagers participate on decisions, and to be honest, this is something really rare. Schools, they are places that have severe problems like drug trafficking and drug use. I think we have to talk about this, and I would like to hear your opinion on this topic. So the first question is how to continue with policies that have started in one government. So you have to elect those who are committed to the same policies that you support. It's up to you, okay? I studied at the University of São Paulo, and you know, we had all sorts of drugs available there. And I'm going to give you an example of how we deal with drugs in Campinas. There is a place. There's a drug dealer who works just behind the school. Everybody knows about it. And the school is located at Jardim Maracana. I know that there's a drug dealer just behind the school. The police does not go there. The teachers, all of them are afraid of drug trafficking of. So we could start with removing drug dealers from the surroundings of schools. This would help a lot. And which was the second question? Yeah, schools, they are extremely important. So if we start working with prevention in the surroundings of schools, it's a huge step. And you have to demand from authorities protection, you know. This would be an immense help. Paulo Afonso, Pastoral da Sobriedade. Talking about your question about the role of CAPES. In reality, what we had in the country up until 2017 was a network, official network, to treat people with mental disorders and drug and chemical dependency. And the official network of care was really restricted. The network didn't respond and was not large enough and prepared enough to address and to treat people with chemical dependency. You know, one single service will not be able to address the myriad of consequences related to drug abuse. And so when a subject needs care and treatment, and if CAPES can deal with it, it's great. However, there are situations in which CAPES is not going to be helpful. Sometimes subjects have to be sheltered in comunidades terapêuticas, and this subject might need to spend a longer period hospitalized in order to start recovering. You know, there are other subjects who have more severe clinical situations. They might be risking themselves and others. So this person probably might need commitment and even involuntarily committed. So what we had back then was an attempt to include all types of people with all types of needs in only one type of service. And this is not going to work. It doesn't work here in Brazil, and it does not work anywhere else in the world. So in 2019, we changed the national policy on drugs. We have been trying to extend the services offered by the government. When we changed the two public policies that I've just mentioned, no service was excluded. We included other services, and we never stopped funding those services. Yesterday, I talked about it. During the pandemic, the CAPS received 100 million reais extra in order to operate. So we have been investing more. So investing in CAPS does not mean investing in communities, and we have to open our minds when it comes to treatment. You know, the laws are owed. Article 2 from the law of the psychiatric reform. So the treatment of people with So we have to work with real needs. We never stopped investing. We do fund. We have just funded psychiatric hospitals. We fund self-help groups. We send funds to CAPES. So we have a large network to help drug users. So from 2019 up until 2022, so we we increased by 20% the network of assistance. We have been working hard to improve treatment in all of its complexity levels. So we have different types of treatment. Sometimes the patient needs to be committed, and sometimes they don't. So we need to see the real needs of the subjects. Okay?
We've been doing some major changes we did some major changes to mental health and drug public policies, and we have also been working to improve these policies. As for treatment, we have not removed any service from the support network. The support network from the public healthcare system was created in 2011. And back then, that was excluding because daycare was not included, outpatient clinics were not included, mental hospitals were not included, not because the population doesn't need that, but because some political groups there thought people didn't need that. So we have been improving the design of our legal framework to try and help tackle different problems, different challenges that are faced by the population. So public policies do not necessarily have to disrupt anything. We do not have to, we're not promoting any rupture in this process. We're seeking improvement. She said something about encouraging the participation of teenagers, public policies targeted at teenagers. We have many drug prevention initiatives in schools with ProWord. We're actually working on this project to enhance it. We're making some tweaks to it to make it more comprehensive. It's faced some practical problems in Brazil and failed to achieve the expected results. So we're working to improve the ProWord project. So we have some initiatives directed at children and teenagers in the area of prevention. We also have some initiatives for the treatment of teenagers. We have shelters, we have therapeutic communities. So we're making progress, and we are having more and more programs for this population. We have a number of problems with teenagers who are severely chemically dependent. So but they also have their rights, and their rights must be upheld. When we published the CONAD resolution that provided for the commitment of teenagers, there was much controversy, but that's fine. But if the teenager agrees to being committed to a therapeutic community, if the family agrees to that, well, then there's no questioning, is there? Some groups may say, no, you want it, your family wants it, but that's not the best for you. Well, there will always be forces against us, and it's always going to be a tough fight. But still, we do not lose heart, and we continue to work to make sure that the young and the teenagers have their rights upheld. Professor Hernani was talking about schools. We have ProWord, and now we're launching, in partnership with the UN Program for the Development, we're launching a big training program for public schools across the country. We just issued a call for tenders, a bid to choose the companies that will help us with that, to choose the organizations that will work with us in this project. But again, we need local mobilization. Civil society organizations must mobilize themselves to address some situations that are unfortunately gaining strength in our school environments. Even though we can have open conversations with teenagers, drug use is not allowed in Brazil for minors. So, like he was saying, there are public education institutions, public schools, public universities where drugs are openly used, and that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. We can have conversations. We can listen to teenagers, but that's banned. That's not legal, right? So we cannot accept this type of situation. And honestly, I think we have been way too permissive with situations that are, first of all, illegal, and also unacceptable from the human point of view. If we think about the problems that these things will cause in the future, they're unacceptable. So we have a legal framework that has been improved recently, but still this legal framework is sometimes not enough, and sometimes it's completely disregarded, even by law enforcement and school professionals, for example, educators themselves. So we need to tighten the grip sometimes and make sure the law is complied with, because the law provides for something, and we have to make sure that this is respected to uphold the rights of our children and teenagers. Yes, someone asked me a question recently. It was more of a provocation. It's important. I have to close the panel. Paulo is telling me that we are running late. We're out of time already. But before we wrap this up, I have a final consideration. I tried to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions. I tried not to guide your questions. This panel is about prevention. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to participate. Anyone is left with unanswered questions? Do we still have unanswered questions? Yes, quite a few. Unfortunately, we do not have the time for your questions, but, well, so first of all, I apologize. We're running late. I apologize if this panel was not exactly what some of you expected, but I just wanted to make it interactive, participatory. So I encourage our speakers to give their final considerations about the importance of prevention, and then we can try and have your questions answered later. Thank you. Final remarks. And I'm sorry, Rossini, it was your turn. I interrupted you. Sure, yes, no problem. CAPES ADES are mainly oriented to a damage reduction approach. It's hard for them to work with other alternatives sometimes, but everything can be solved with local arrangements. Here in the metro area, the pastoral office of SEBRAE has been doing some outstanding work with local organizations. Municipal councils can also be a channel for that. Julia, to answer your question, I think we cannot think about prevention without recognizing the value of teenagers and the young themselves. We have to harness this rebellious nature of the young to our benefit. Every young person is potentially a rebel because they are born to a society that they didn't choose the rules. Sometimes they do not even understand the logic, the rationale behind that. So we have to tap into that potential. We have to to channel this dissatisfaction to encourage them to build their own life projects and to encourage them to make the choices that will help them, the choices that will enable them to achieve their goals, their objectives in life. So I think that, yes, there is this dissatisfaction in the young, but we have to tap into that to our benefit, to the benefit of our cause. There's no prevention without the engagement of schools, again, and schools have to understand the role they play. I don't want to increase the burden of teachers. I know that teachers are often overworked and underpaid, but schools have to understand that their mission is also to prepare the young for life, encourage them to be good citizens, encourage critical thinking. So we have to find ways to discuss this in the very curriculum of schools. We cannot think about prevention without engaging schools, without placing schools in a leading position. I know there are many teachers here, principals. I'm happy with that, and I'm sure that you also have a great contribution to the discussion here, how we can use evidence-based cases to inform and support what we do in our schools. And then as my final remark, I would like to emphasize that political agents, I'm an alderman, but there are other political agents here. Everyone is potentially a political agent. So political agents will only be aware that prevention is the best way forward if they can participate in meetings like this, fora, discussions, symposium, to discuss the problems that distress society today, problems that affect us, problems that cost us money, problems that cost us our future. So prevention is for everything, for health, for violence, for drugs, for drug abuse, for alcohol abuse. This should be a mandatory part of the agenda in every political level of the country. And this must be a collective project. And again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for bearing with us. Yes, again, it has to be in the agenda. It has to be on the agenda. It has to be part of our society's everyday discussions. It has to be discussed in all branches of power, legislative, executive, judiciary. It has to be an item on the agenda of everyone. I'm square. I admit it. I'm square. I've never done drugs, and I'm afraid of drugs. I'm afraid of how I will react to that. I'm terrified of drugs, my children are also square like me. They are square like me, and be square and admit your fear. Face your admit your fears, and so that was my personal remark. But I think it applies to everyone, and I think you have to be square. That's the message. Be square. Don't do drugs. You don't know how you will react to that. It's unknown, it's uncertain, and make sure it's the next item on your agenda. Whether you are political agents, direct political agents like Mr. Rossini or like him who's an alderman, but yes, make sure it's part of the debate. Make sure it's discussed. Make sure it's considered in every policy, in every discussion you have, in your municipality, in your organization. And Rossini, allow me to disagree. Teachers do have a responsibility over that. Teachers are educators, and as educators, they must address this in their everyday work. I apologize to the teachers here, but my mom was a teacher, and she always discussed that in her classes. Thank you for the opportunity, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this great discussion. At the federal level, we're working with evidence-based research that's informing our decision-making, and that's what's enabling us to achieve good results in different areas, different fronts. We created the National Drug Prevention System, whose objective is to bring together and articulate different players and different programs across the country for the next few years. So we've been, like I said, we've been achieving some good results. We're working with schools, with communities, in partnership with universities. We have a big training program for teachers going on, programs for the communities and community centers. We have a partnership with Coalizão Brasil. We have prevention initiatives for specific audiences. There's the ERA project for drug prevention among pregnant women, nursing women, and young mothers. We work with prevention in remote communities, indigenous communities. I was recently in the Amazonian state of Roraima with a big indigenous population. They have a serious problem with alcohol abuse, drug abuse, but especially alcohol abuse. So we're doing some targeted work there. We have drug prevention programs in association with sports, in communities, community centers. We have some initiatives trying to reduce the impact of drugs among people in some vulnerable situations. We've been working with suicide, because the second biggest risk factor for suicidals is drug abuse. So we've been working on that. Drug prevention can also have a positive impact on suicide reduction. So there's a number of fronts we've been working on. Prevention in various contexts, like reducing car accidents and the death toll of car accidents, because many car accidents are related to drug and alcohol abuse, right? As everyone knows. There's a project called Frente Brasil, which works on the reduction of homicides, murders, and we know that many murders are associated with drug abuse and alcohol abuse. We achieved a record decrease in that last year. We've been achieving significant decreases in homicide rates in the country. Last year, we achieved like an almost 50% reduction. In the first quarter of this year, we achieved a 10% reduction over that number. So hopefully this year we'll achieve a record low homicide rate because of, and that is also due to our new drug policies. People say that we have to be more flexible in this war on drugs, but we can't. That many people advocate that, but we've been achieving good results doing the very opposite. We are tightening the grip, like I said, and we are facing drugs head on. We have strict policies, and we're making them stricter, and not only in terms of prevention and care, but also in terms of repression. We've been breaking records in drug seizures. We broke many records in drug seizures last year, and all these initiatives have to be articulated. They have to have like a common focus. And also we have to talk about the prevention of relapses. It's another level of prevention. People who have been victims of chemical dependency and they have been rehabilitated, and we have to prevent them from relapsing. So we have different initiatives with different organizations, civil society, support groups, help groups, many groups, family groups, therapeutic communities. Public services also play a fundamental role in avoiding relapses and keeping people free of drugs. So our intention from the very beginning was that we have always pursued this expansion of our partnerships. We want to strengthen our current partnerships and make new ones. We want to train people and build capacity. We work with states, municipalities. Soraya is here. She's a great partner of ours from the state of Minas Gerais. We work with groups that help us with education, and I'm talking about ISAP, Freemind, great partners of the federal administration that help us train leaders, train the trainers. So at the federal level, we are doing our part. We're designing public policies that increasingly involve and engage the entire society in this war on drug of ours. When we talk about political engagement, we have partnerships with the Ministry of Infrastructure, which controls the roads, the road transportation. We also have partnerships with the Ministry of Health, with the Federal Department of the Drug Enforcement Agency. So we have training programs for drivers, for road patrols. So we're trying to bring together all the stakeholders so that together, all the stakeholders really, so that together we can make progress. So we have to work on different fronts. We have to work on different fronts of drug prevention, and we have to engage everyone. The more people we engage in prevention actions, the more positive results we'll achieve. That was it. Thank you. Okay, again, I would like to apologize to those who could not ask your questions, but Dr. Quirino, Rossini, Guilherme they will hang around, and we will have to start our next panel, but they'll be around, so make sure you approach them and ask your questions directly to them. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your participation. Let's move on to the next panel. Thank you. All right, fellas.